Hey everyone, what is going on? Welcome back to the channel. My name is Brian, and again, we are in release season, and there are really two bottles I look forward to most all year long. We recently already reviewed the Four Roses Limited, and now we have the 2022 King of Kentucky. So this is a larger release than we've seen in previous years. It's the 5th year of coming out. We have 3,500 bottles total that are going out. Still low numbers compared to a lot of limited edition products, but higher than we've seen before. If you know anything about me, if you've watched previous videos here on the channel, you know I love King of Kentucky. And so I am very excited to see where we are this year. And what's exciting about this video particularly is we're gonna take a look at this barrel here, which happens to be barrel 15 this year, but there were two products that came out for King of Kentucky this year. The standard 15-year product, and then there was a smaller release of only about 250 bottles of an 18-year release. MSRP on the two is $250 and $350 respectively, if you ever found those at retail prices in stores, but I doubt you'll likely find it for those prices, specifically the 18. The 18-year is now very few and far between, only releasing in Kentucky and on secondary sites for thousands of dollars. And so I'm actually going to try this barrel 15 of the 15-year. I'm going to compare it to barrel 22, also the 15-year of this year. And then we're going to taste through barrel 1 of the 18-year. Thankfully, I was able to go to my local bar and try those other two samples. So we'll talk about those in comparison after we dive into this barrel 15. This nose here brings me right back home to King of Kentucky. It almost reminds me of Rolo candy. It's chocolate covered caramel. It's got a little bit of sugariness on the nose, not quite powdered sugar, but definitely a little bit amplified sugar. And in that regard, I think it's kind of close to the 2021s. If you remember me talking, and if you were to message me and look through notes and stuff that I have, I try and keep record of multiple barrels to try because King of Kentucky is a single barrel product. But in that, I try and see if there's trends of flavors. Overall, the 2019s, I was a really big fan of, and there was a big kind of funky, dusty-like characteristic to almost all the barrels that I had. In 2020, you might remember me mentioning that it was a little bit more modern profile. It's kind of what I like to think of, maybe newer modern turkey versus older turkey. And then the 2021 releases I thought had a little bit more sugariness, a little bit more cakiness in terms of their sweetness. So in that regard, with the sugariness on the nose, it makes me think of some of the 2021 barrels that I've had before. You get raisin, tobacco. There's a cinnamon buttercream like note in here, which could almost be mistaken for Amburana when you've probably seen past video that I did about the rare character Amburana finish rye, or earlier on I've talked about the Starlight finish in Amburana. I feel like that kind of nuance, that kind of characteristic that it gives with the sweet buttercream and the cinnamon notes, but the complex spice, I feel like it has a similar but softer nose like that here, but then hits in with all the barrel char notes that you're used to having in King of Kentucky. Brown sugar there to boot as well. Let's go ahead and dive in on the palate. The palate is slightly mellow, and you might hear that and say, "Oh, gross! Why would I want that?" In this regard, it's a good thing. I've had Kings all over the place. Even back in the 2019s, one of my favorite barrels was barrel 4, but it was pretty aggressive. It was kind of jagged. It kind of was I like to say angular in its flavors. Everything kind of hit really specific and really loud, and there's a lot going on. I liked that. But I also like a pour that's a little bit more brought together. It's a little bit more mellow. It's a little bit more relaxed. That's overall what I liked about the 2019 is they had this relaxed, easy feeling that almost remind me of kind of older turkey products. It's got some nice spice there, and then it moves into cherry pie, moves into the leather that you're used to getting. Oak is really well placed here. And then a lot of the similar flavors like we've mentioned before on the nose. Let's compare quickly to the other barrels that I got a chance to try. Barrel 22. Barrel 22 right out of the gate was more like that rugged, jagged profile that I just mentioned. The nose was powerful immediately, drew me right in. Musty oak, creme brulee, molasses, almost a Tootsie Roll like chocolate note, tons of barrel char, coffee, and the kind of cigar box note as well. All that on the nose. Moving into the palate, explosive right away. Lots of spice, so it's very big, it's kind of a bruiser, sensational all around the palate, very rich, very coating. The oak makes itself known immediately. Drenched in brown sugar, cherry, and brownie finishing. The finish was dry, but it did carry for a long time. The longer it went on, it did kind of move into these spiced banana, spiced pineapple, spiced cherry notes. So if you're a really big Brown-Forman fan, Old Forester fan, you probably like the subtle banana notes. I'm not overly huge on the banana notes, so I kind of didn't like the long linger of Barrel 22, but there were some big rich characteristics about it that I liked compared to this batch 15 that was a little bit more soft and mellow. The soft and mellow definitely gives nuance, and again, it gives no nods to Wild Turkey products that I enjoy. What's interesting about this Barrel 22 is that it's a barrel that actually reminds me of a lot of the past years, all in one and for different reasons. Let me explain. It has a little bit of the funky nod that reminds me overall of the profiles from the barrels I tried in 2019. However, on the palate and on the nose, it does kind of have this cleaner, a little bit sweeter profile that reminds me of the 2020s. Like I've already explained, it's sort of this more modern turkey approach versus the older turkey approach. Everything is just a little bit more fine-tuned. In one of my older videos, how I explain it is it's like a really well-produced album compared to maybe a little bit more live, warm session. A lot of the 2021s, and like this Barrel 15, it had a little bit more sugariness to the palate. The Barrel 22, it was a little bit more darker toned, and so it loses that sugariness that I usually found in several of the 2021 releases. So it has some nods to things that I liked about 2019, the 2020, and the 2021 releases. Moving over to the 18-year product. And part of the reason why I wanted to talk about all these barrels and compare them to past years, because I also know that Fred Minnick had a review out, and I know that his single barrel that he tried seemed like it was very hot, and that's not the experience I'm having here. However, these, like I mentioned before, are single barrel products and your miles may vary. The 18-year, softer on the nose. It was the usual flavors you would get out of King, but they're soft and mellow as well, like this Barrel 15. It lingers longer and richer than the Barrel 22 that I was talking about, but it has more tannins on the palate. And when we talk about tannins, if you are familiar with Wild Turkey, if you know the flavor of, let's say, the Russell's Reserve 03 or the Wild Turkey Bottled in Bond 17-year Master's Keep, where it's almost right on the edge of too tannic, too dry of an oakiness. That oakiness carried itself into this 18-year product. I personally like that sort of tannic nature. I like that kind of drying oak, but the oak is present still in the 15-year and a little bit more balance in there. So if you're someone who likes oak, but you don't like it to be over oaky, the 18-year might be a little bit harsh for you. It had that musty medicinal grape note like you get in the Russell's 03, but I think as I lay them all out together, I was surprised at, sure, maybe something score a couple of points higher on the 18-year release. The flavors were similar and aligned with this Barrel 15. And for what they are, MSRP wise, sure, maybe I'd give the nod to the 18-year, but pound for pound and what they're going for on secondary and overall value that you get out of that, it's this Barrel 15 regular release of the 2022 King Kentucky that I am taking all day long. And again, personal preference, you'll probably find different single barrels that have things that you enjoy. To me, I would say that this year's Barrel 22 reminded me a little bit more of the batch 14 from 2021. It had more fudge, it had more brownie, it had more chocolate notes. And that's a little bit unusual from what I had in the other barrel releases from 2021. This Barrel 15, because it's soft and mellow, and I kind of gave that precursor here, it almost reminds me of, let's say, Barrel 9 or Barrel 2 from 2019. Overall, great year. but they were a little softer when you first opened the bottles. But one thing that I noticed is as you drank through that bottle, it got better and better and better, specifically with Barrel 2. So if this one is mellow but has a lot of great complexity and flavors, the flavors you already like about King Kentucky, I can't wait to see how this one continues to open up. For me and for the barrels that I tried, another home run for Brown-Forman and for King of Kentucky. One of my favorite bottles of all time and always year after year. Guys, thanks so much for tuning in. I hope this was insightful. If you will get a chance to try the 2022 King of Kentucky, let me know down below what barrel you tried and what you thought of it, what your impressions were. Let me know if you've tried King of Kentucky at all. If you haven't tried King of Kentucky and you've wanted to, leave me those comments down below. I'd love to interact with you guys on this. If you get a chance to try various years of King of Kentucky, I'd love to hear how you rank those up in the comments down below. Guys, thanks again for tuning in. I hope this was insightful. I hope it was helpful, maybe to figure out if you wanted to open a bottle, pass on a bottle, or if it's something that might align with your palate compared to how it compared to past releases. Thanks, as always, everyone. Until next time, we'll see you all later.